Chapter 12, Target Practice, June 9th. Alexander was back, and it was all Lillian could do to sleep, let alone not inhale her food at breakfast like a starved animal. But somehow she managed both and headed out to meet him. She all but jogged to where their first lesson took place. She was eager to show off her new skill and talk to him about the buck, but mostly she was eager just to see him. She kept telling herself that her excitement was just the newness of it all, but it's more than that. He treated her with respect, but not like a princess. It was refreshing. She barely knew him, but she felt that she had known him much longer. She felt comfortable with him. With other guys she had dated, she always knew there was an underlying motive of marrying a princess. She couldn't fault them for it, though. Power and prestige attracted many people, usually the wrong people. Richard wasn't like that, she knew, but she didn't have a connection with him. There was something about Alexander. He likes me for me. The smell of Thackelberry bread greeted her nose as she drew near. As she came into the clearing, she saw Alexander sitting and messing with some of his arrows. Does he know how gorgeous he is? "Good morning," Lillian said, slowing down and trying not to seem too eager. "Lillian," said Alexander. He smiled. "I wasn't sure when you'd show up." "Bread?" "Yes, please." Just like before, it had something in it she couldn't quite place, but it was still delicious. "No cheese this time?" she teased. Alexander reached into his pack, pulling out a wedge of cheese. "Is this what you were looking for?" he said with a wink. He cut a slice and handed it to her. It was ripened just like before. "Okay," she said between bites. "You have to tell me how you have good Frivoly cheese, and what exactly is in your Thackelberry bread." So inquisitive. "I'll tell you what. I'll answer one question if you show me your skills." "Deal," she said as she flipped the last piece of bread in her mouth. She was surprised at how nervous she was. She'd only done this for the past 3 weeks. Now it should be routine. She got her bow and quiver and headed over to the spot she'd been shooting from. She took a deep breath and went through her cadence. Shoes, shoulders, sight, select, slide, sigh, shoot. She did this 3 times for each distance. Each time she got a little faster and smoother, and not a word from Alexander. "I knew it. I'm doing it wrong. Troll dung." Lillian released the last arrow, placing it in her cluster. She stood there for what seemed like forever, unsure of herself, but still heard nothing from Alexander. She finally turned around to make sure he was even watching. "So..." Lillian expected something. Alexander shook his head a little, as if waking from a trance. "Oh, sorry. I was just taking it all in." "If we're going to keep doing this, we're going to have to break you of this silence habit." Alexander walked over to her. I know. My mom says the same thing. I'm sorry. I was just..." She cut him off. "Taking it all in. Yeah, I heard." It came out curter than she meant, and she instantly regretted it. She tried to give a look, conveying she was only half kidding. He put his hand on her shoulder, and that same shiver of pleasure went down her spine. "What I was going to say is I was just so impressed I didn't know what to say." Her heartbeat picked up. "Really? I mean, really? You're not just saying that because you're the princess?" His eyebrow raised. Then he smiled. "No, Lillian, I'm not. I wish now I would have given you more to do. What you've accomplished with your clusters is remarkable. I know archers who have shot for years who couldn't make clusters like that." Now she was blushing. "It's not that big a deal. I'm not even hitting a target." "Well, I hope to change that today. I take it the bow's working out. I adjusted the strength a little higher to give you some more distance. Looks like it worked." He started walking to retrieve her other arrows, and she followed. "Yeah, it was a little stiff at first, but I've probably added a good 20 paces since you've left," she bragged a little. "So I believe you owe me an answer." "Most definitely. After that display?" "So which is it? The secret recipe or the perfectly aged Frivoly?" Lillian was pretty sure she'd get the bread eventually, but how he'd managed to keep the cheese from spoiling was really stumping her. "I'm going to have to go with the cheese." It wasn't that it was impossible to have fresh Frivoly cheese. It was just rare because of where it came from and the distance it had to travel. It was made from the Frivoly goats of the Tapera kingdom that resided by Tocaran Lake. It was aged in casks 1 year to the day and lasted about 5 days after that. Any time a shop or Pierre managed to get some, they made sure it was advertised and bought quickly. The journey from Tapera took about 3 days, and the cheese only lasted a day, maybe 2, after that if it had been properly cared for in transit. And the last time Lillian looked, Alexander wasn't carrying around a snow box. He picked up her small distance cluster. "I know I said it, but I'm really proud of you. I'm kind of excited to see how good you'll do on the next part." He handed the arrows to her, and she put them back in her quiver. "Thank you, but don't try to change the subject, Mr. Teacher. Cheese." I wasn't trying to change the subject. It's just funny because it's like a magic trick. Right now, I have you wrapped up in mystery. Once I tell you the secret, you'll just see me as a regular guy. They arrived at the medium cluster and started collecting. "First off, you do not have me wrapped up in mystery." She looked at him coyly. "And secondly, you're not like any other regular guy I've ever met." "Well, you're not like any other princess I've ever met." "So there are other princesses, He played along. "I've met a few," he said as he handed her more arrows. "But you are the one I like spending time with the most," he smiled at her. An awkward pause descended as they both just looked at each other. Lillian could feel her face getting red and quickly turned away. "Cheese, please." Okay. So I'm assuming you know the delicate nature of the cheese and where it's made. Otherwise you wouldn't be asking." She nodded and continued on to the long-distance arrows. "Well, there are 2 parts. The first part will seem simple. As I'm coming back from Tapera through the mountains, I keep it in an airtight goatskin pouch. I found the less air it's exposed to, the longer it lasts. Then I usually keep it in the river as much as I can on my way back. The river's mostly snow-fed, so it keeps the cheese cold. By the time I get here, it's still good for about 2 to 3 days. Lillian just looked at him. "That's it? You keep it cold? Like a snow box?" Alexander gestured. "Ta-da!" Lillian punched him in the arm. "That doesn't count. I want another question." "Ow! Hey, I tried to tell you the magic would disappear." "Oh, but there is one thing I left out." She eyeballed him suspiciously. "I take it secret passage." "A secret passage? In the mountains?" "Yeah." "Why haven't I heard of this secret passage?" "I don't know. It doesn't look like it's been used very much, though. I just kind of found it one day. Probably shaves half a day, maybe more, off the travel time." Mental note: ask the dwarves about secret passages in the mountains. "Well, that's a little better. Can you show me one day?" I suppose." It was his turn to look away. "But for right now, let's focus on archery," he said as he picked up the remaining arrows. Did he just blush? Lillian couldn't be sure, but Alexander looked flustered for the first time since she'd met him. Whatever it was, he hid it quickly as they walked back. "So what's on the agenda today?" she asked. "Well, first thing I want to do is see how fast you can actually shoot. See how you feel the shot. Your cadence was really good. I could tell you just let it flow as you kept shooting. More reflex than thought." She thought about the rabbit a few days ago and then the buck. "Can I talk to you about something?" "Of course, always." "The day before yesterday, there was this buck, but it wasn't a buck. I mean, it was, but there was something about it. Its eyes were like your necklace. I had to kill it." She shuddered. She tried to hold back the tears, but couldn't. Alexander didn't hesitate to hold her. She fit. "Shh, it's okay, it's okay." She just let him hold her for a minute. His arms comforted her. He was a warm fire on a crisp day. He was safe. Her problems faded away like ripples in a pond. She gathered herself and explained what happened as they walked back. "I thought you might have seen something since you, well, you know," she said, still not crazy about the idea. "Hunt here. I've come across some stubborn animals, but nothing like that. That's a bit troublesome. I'll keep my eye out, okay? Here, I have something that'll make you feel better." He reached into his pack, pulled out a small wax-wrapped package and handed it to her. Lillian wrapped the paper to find a piece of chocolate. "Chocolate?" Not just any chocolate, an Elwood family recipe. My mom makes me a batch for my trips. She says it's to make sure I come home to get more, he said fondly. Lillian took a small bite. It was exquisite. She had never tasted chocolate like this before. By the Fae! She took another bite. This is amazing! Trust me, I know. It's all I can do not to go through the whole batch before I'm out of sight of the farm. He laughed. Lillian placed the rest in her mouth. Actually, she did feel better. Thank you. That helped. My pleasure. So, you ready to tackle today's lesson? Yes. All right then. It's time to teach you to be the bow. Alexander explained the process. The place we want you to get is feeling as if the bow is just another appendage, another arm or leg. He reached down, grabbed a small rock, and tossed it at her head without warning. Lillian quickly reacted, catching it before it hit her. Hey, what was that for? She asked indignantly. For understanding. How did you catch the rock? What? Did you think about it? Did you think of all the things you needed to do before catching it? Lift your arm, open your hand, move to intersect the rock, close your fingers to catch it. Well, of course not. Exactly. You just did it. It was a reflex, just like how I saved you on the bridge. Yeah, but that's different. Everyone knows how to catch. Shooting an arrow is a skill, just like catching. You weren't born knowing how to catch. Someone taught you, just like someone taught you the basics on how to shoot. He came up to her and handed her some different arrows, just like I'm going to teach you how to shoot without thinking. It just takes practice. Watch out, Lil. Don't fall too hard. Problem was, she felt like she already had. He had his own gravity, and she couldn't help but be drawn in. She was definitely smitten with Alexander. How much, she wasn't sure, but she liked him. Now that she could get a better look at the arrows, they seemed familiar. A very lightweight bluish metal. They looked like Calderan steel. Alexander finished her thought. I make them myself. It's good for consistency for the really important shots. Like saving falling princesses off a bridge, she joked. Like saving falling princesses off a bridge. I usually carry about 10. The rest are just regular arrows. But their strength and weight make them extremely versatile. I want you to practice with both, but don't go falling in love now. Lillian started to blush. Excuse me? The arrows. Don't go falling in love with them. Oh, yeah, sure, I knew that. Geez, Lillian, get a hold of yourself. But if you're really nice, I'll make you a set when I go to Caldera. Lillian panicked. You're not leaving again, are you? Alexander teased her. You didn't miss me now, did you? She recomposed herself. No. Flurb, that was curt. Yes. I missed practicing with someone is all. It's okay, Lillian. I missed you too. I don't have many friends, remember? He said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Friends. Right. It's just nice to step out of the princess role is all, she explained. Everyone knows me. Everyone knows Princess Lillian. Even my friends treat me different sometimes. With you, I'm allowed to be me. I'm allowed to relax. Well, I'm glad you feel comfortable around me. I've enjoyed teaching you, and so far you've been an excellent student. So far? I've got a surprise for you. He winked and grabbed her hand. Come on, let's see what you got. He didn't let go as he led her to a grove of trees with a nice opening in the middle. I call it the Forge. Well, that sounds menacing. Lillian glanced around but didn't see anything out of the ordinary. What is it? It's a practice area I designed about a year ago. I have one set up back home, but needed something to pass the time while I'm up here providing for my family. He walked over to a tree. Watch this. Lillian heard some sort of click, and then from nowhere, a target about head high dropped down from one of the trees in front of her. I have 3 different settings, which release them at different times. Come look. I'll show you how it works. Lillian went over to the tree to find an elaborate contraption of levers, knobs, pulleys, and ropes going out in all directions from the tree. A bag released sand, triggering the various targets. He showed her how to start it and reset it so she could practice whenever she wanted. The dwarves would be impressed with this. So you ready? He asked. He was adorable. She wasn't sure if he was more excited to see her skills or show off his toy. I guess. She walked into the opening. You're going to have to use your ears and your eyes. Remember, right now I'm interested in speed, not accuracy. Reflex, response. As long as you're shooting in the general direction, you don't have to hit the target. Sounds like a challenge, she tossed back playfully. He parried with a smirk. Impress me. She took her stance. The anticipation was killing her. Breathe, just breathe. The first target dropped to her 1 o'clock, about shoulder height. Shoot, shoulder, side or side. Select, slide, side, shoot. She missed a foot to the left. Faster, she heard him from behind. Don't think about it, just react. Easy for you to say, you're already impressive. The next target came back to her left, knee height. Shoot, shoulder, side, select, slide, slide, shoot. She was closer this time. Is that bet? She stopped abruptly as the next target dropped again to her left. Shoot, shoulder, side, select. Another target dropped to her right. Shoot, way off. She turned to her new target and another one dropped. She stopped and closed her eyes. She was flustered. She knew what Alexander was trying to do. She was thinking too much. She just had to react, just like the other day when she spun around on the rabbit. The rabbit. She opened her eyes and shot. It nicked the target. Flipped around to the next one. Shoot, shoot. The arrow struck into the corner. Target, turn, shoot, target, turn, shoot. The targets were dropping so fast now she didn't even have time to notice where her arrows were going. There was a slight pause when a twig snapped behind her. She turned and shot without hesitation. Her arrow was headed straight toward Alexander.